It seems like molasses has kind of fallen out of fashion in recent years. However, I really like molasses. I grew up on molasses cookies and molasses used as a sweetener in different baked goods. And so today we are going to be making molasses squares. I found this cookbook recently and it kind of intrigues me because it's in celebration of the silver anniversary or the silver jubilee of the American supermarket. According to this, the American supermarket started in 1930 as we know it today, because before that, if you went to a grocery, then you would be getting flour out of a big bag and scooping out what you needed, or taking from Cracker Barrels or things like that, whatever your grocery needs were. However, the modern supermarket, you could go up and down the aisles and get whatever you needed yourself and then just go pay for it. So this is in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the American supermarket, and thus that is from 1955. And today we're going to be making molasses squares, and they have an option at the end to change this up and make it into chocolate molasses squares. So we're going to give that a try and see how that goes. The first step in this recipe, as with many baked good recipes, is to do some sifting. So I have 1 cup of flour, and that's gonna go right in the sifter. And then I also have a ½ teaspoon of salt, and we're gonna sift those two together into a mixing bowl. And after this is done being sifted, just set that aside because we're gonna be headed over to the stove for the next step. In a small saucepan on your stovetop, we are going to put in a ½ cup of shortening. I'm using butter here, and a ¼ cup of molasses. I'm actually adding a little bit extra molasses because at the end of this, when we add our chocolate, the baker's chocolate that I have is unsweetened as opposed to semi-sweet, which is probably what this recipe would have called for. So I'm adding just a little bit extra sweet factor here to compensate for that. Once your butter is melted, we're going to add some baking soda as well as some brown sugar. Alright, our brown sugar has dissolved into our molasses mixture here, and our next step is to take a well-beaten egg and add that in. Now this is kind of a risky thing to do because, as you might imagine, this mixture here is hot. It just came off the stove. So I'm going to add a little bit of this to our beaten egg to try and temper that a little bit and mix that well, and then add the egg into the full mixture here. That should be good. I'm just going to add that back in and mix it all together. To make this chocolate molasses squares, I have some chocolate melting in the microwave, and it calls for 2 squares, which is actually 2 ounces worth of baker's chocolate. Now that we've got our chocolate out, we're going to add it to the rest of our mixture, and I think we're good to go. The last step, as you can imagine, is to put our dry ingredients in with our wet here and make a final batter out of this. And also, as you can imagine, this is very, very thick, just from the density of everything that's in there. So I think this is going to be a very dense molasses square when we're all done with this. But we're just going to add in our dry ingredients a little at a time and mix those in. And once that's done, the recipe actually says to put this into 2 9x9 pans. And if I had read the directions clearer, I would have done this recipe in half. However, I did not, so I will be making apparently 2 pans of this. Once everything is in your pans, it's going to go in a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes, although I'm going to watch these carefully because there is not a ton of batter in either of these pans, and I don't want them to burn. So I'm gonna watch that closely and see how it does. It's been just a little bit over 20 minutes and the edges in the metal pan were starting to get a little bit dark, so I decided to pull these out. They are very thin, they are not thick squares. In fact, if I was not following this recipe verbatim according to the book, what I would have done if I were making these according to my desires is I would have just put it in one pan and had thicker squares, because these are going to be really thin once we cut them. This is an interesting texture. It's similar to a brownie, and yet it's gooier, like it's sweeter. There's definitely a very high sugar content to the flour content in this recipe, and I think that shows in the overall product, which I think also is why the edges were prone to getting a little bit darker, because of how much sugar there was between the molasses and the brown sugar. And with only in each pan really a half cup of flour, that's not very much. They taste fine. They taste kind of like a brownie, except obviously it makes sense, being a chocolate molasses square, that it tastes like a brownie that also has some molasses in it. I don't think this is a new favorite, but it definitely was worth making. Is this something I would make again? Probably not. But if somebody served this to me, I would happily eat it.